My name is Elise. I've been volunteering at the Midwestern Wildlife Refuge and Education Center for a little over 6 years now, working mainly with hoofed mammals, zebras, llamas, camels, and even a few orphaned deer. I've watched births, I've sat beside animals during their final moments, and I've helped with the quiet work of earning a scared creature's trust. But nothing quite prepared me for Sahara. She wasn't just another rescue. She was a survivor of something darker, something so hidden from public sight that it took a string of fortunate accidents and the sharp eyes of a government inspector to bring her, and a few others, out of it. It was in July, 3 years ago, when Sahara's story came into our lives. That week had been blisteringly hot. Even the camels we already had, which are built for arid conditions, were staying under the shade tarps and moving slowly. That Monday morning, I was finishing up with water checks when our director, Lisa, got a call from a contact at the Department of Wildlife and Game Enforcement. I remember her face going pale and focused, like something serious had just dropped. By lunch, we were huddled in the break room with the full animal care team while Lisa relayed the situation. A traveling circus had been discovered operating illegally near a dry, remote strip of the Sonoran Desert outside Tucson. It was unlicensed, off-grid, and hiding under the guise of being a private, educational caravan. In truth, it was a cruel and unsafe operation. Animals being kept in trailers in triple-digit heat with barely any ventilation, barely enough food, and no veterinary care. Among the animals were 3 dromedary camels. 2 were male, 1 female. The female was in the worst shape, thin, dehydrated, with raw calluses on her legs from improper restraints. That camel was Sahara. She'd been performing tricks, supposedly, in a faded ring with rusty fencing and blistered canvas banners. Her trainer claimed she'd been born in captivity in Morocco and transported through a questionable import operation 5 years prior. All of it was illegal. None of it was documented. The circus had been cited before, but they'd kept moving. This time, someone tipped off the authorities in time, and a coordinated raid was conducted. Lisa explained that we'd be taking the female. The males were going to sanctuaries specializing in behaviorally complex rescues. The goal, she said, was for us to not just heal her, but help her reintegrate into a proper, social camel environment. And hopefully, one day, become a kind of ambassador, someone visitors could connect with, someone who could show people the reality behind wildlife exploitation. We all knew it was a long shot. But it was worth trying. 3 days later, Sahara arrived. The transport truck pulled into the service bay early in the morning. A vet from the enforcement agency rode along, monitoring her vitals. I was there with Martin, our senior handler. We watched as the ramp was lowered and she was coaxed out. The first thing I noticed was how quiet she was. Camels can be vocal, curious, even grumpy. But Sahara moved like a shadow. Her head was low, lips drawn tight. Her legs trembled under her weight. Her ribs were visible, and her hump sagged slightly from lack of proper nutrition. Martin murmured something under his breath I didn't catch. We stood back and let the vet guide her into our isolation enclosure. It's protocol with any rescue, not just for the health of our existing animals, but for the new arrivals' sake, too. You don't know what they've been through. You give them time. You listen. Sahara didn't eat at first. She sniffed at the alfalfa but ignored it. Drank a little, but not much. She paced at night. We installed a night cam in the corner of the enclosure, and you could see her circling the fence line in the dark. Just pacing. No vocalizations. No reactions to the enrichment toys. No interest in the handlers. Lisa consulted with a behaviorist out of San Diego who had experience with trauma rehabilitation. They recommended soft routines, constant presence, no pressure. Let her see the other camels from a distance but not interact yet. We played desert sounds, wind through palm trees, distant calls of jackals, even just plain silence. We tried to recreate the natural peace of the wild she never knew. The first breakthrough came with watermelons. Someone, probably Sarah from enrichment, brought one out on a whim. She cracked it open and set it near the fence. We all stood behind the glass, barely breathing. Sahara approached it slowly. Took 10 minutes. But she sniffed. Then she licked. Then, like a switch, she started eating. Messily. Desperately. And then she sat down beside it. Not lying down, just kneeling, in that classic camel resting pose. But the tension in her body changed. That was the moment we realized she might trust us, one day. Over the next month, we built a relationship based on consistency. I started spending my mornings near her enclosure, just reading out loud. Nothing special, just a steady voice. She got used to the sound. Then she started watching me. One day she leaned in and sniffed my shirt. I cried later that day. I'm not ashamed to admit it. There were scars on her body. Not fresh ones, old, healed over, some likely from harnesses, some perhaps from being struck. We documented everything for her file. We also started talking to legal experts about the likelihood of her owner trying to reclaim her. Fortunately, they had no documentation, and she was officially placed under state protection before being permanently transferred to our zoo. Integration took patience. The other camels were skeptical, especially Reza, our dominant male. But camels are social creatures, and Sahara, once her strength returned, showed signs of wanting contact. She'd stand at the boundary fence and call, a low, rumbling sound, toward the others. We moved carefully, introduced her to the most docile camel first, Nina, a younger female who had grown up in a sanctuary. They sniffed, stood awkwardly. Then Sahara did something we hadn't seen. She leaned her long neck toward Nina and rested her head against her. That was the beginning of her new life. By the time Sahara met Nina face to face, it had been about 7 weeks since her rescue. Her physical recovery was moving faster than her emotional one. She'd put on close to 80 pounds, and her hump had started to regain shape, small, but measurable progress. But her personality was still cloaked in caution. Every sound made her flinch. She rarely made noise. Even her chewing was quiet, deliberate. That first quiet contact with Nina was our biggest indicator that Sahara might be ready for more. Not just more space, but more connection. Camels live in herds in the wild, not always tightly bonded, but always social. It's unnatural for one to be alone. Isolation, for them, isn't just lonely, it can break their minds. Our animal behaviorist, Lauren, developed a week-by-week integration plan. We started with daily contact windows. Each morning, Sahara would spend an hour beside Nina, separated only by a soft barrier fence made of tension netting. We watched closely, no signs of stress, no aggressive postures. Nina was calm. Sahara stayed near her. By week 2, we let them share space under supervision. They sniffed. They grazed near each other. They even lay down in the same quadrant of the enclosure once, still several feet apart, but facing the same direction. Anyone who works with herd animals knows how significant that is. That kind of parallel rest means trust. It wasn't all perfect. On day 4, Reza, our male, made a noise that sounded like a warning grunt, and Sahara spooked. She bolted, knocking over a water trough and bruising her side on a gate. She wasn't physically hurt, but she didn't come near Nina again for 3 days. We scaled back, let her choose. Some days she'd watch the others from the shade. Other days she'd approach the fence line and just stand. Always cautious, always calculating. Through it all, I kept coming. Every day, at 8 a.m., I was there with my binder, a chair, and my old blue thermos. I kept reading. Fiction, nonfiction, desert folklore, articles about climate change, anything with rhythm and voice. I wasn't trying to teach her anything. I just wanted her to feel that human presence didn't have to mean command or cruelty. One morning in late September, Sahara did something unexpected. As I was reading something about Saharan trade caravans from a National Geographic article, she walked over and stood behind me. Quiet. Her breath stirred my shoulder. I froze, not out of fear, but because I didn't want to scare her away. Then she touched her nose to the top of my head. Just once. Then walked away again. I had to sit down after that. We started training sessions soon after, what we call positive reinforcement introduction. No prods, no pressure. We used target sticks with bright-colored tips. When Sahara touched the stick with her nose, she got a treat, usually carrot slices or watermelon chunks. The goal wasn't to make her perform. It was to get her comfortable moving toward a person without fear. She took to it faster than I expected. In a few weeks, she was following simple commands: stand, step, halt, all using gestures and the target stick. But what really impressed us was how she began watching the other camels, mimicking behaviors. If Nina approached a handler, Sahara would follow. If Reza rumbled and lay down, Sahara did too. She was learning, through observation, how to be part of a group again. How to be a camel. By November, Sahara had been integrated full-time into the main camel enclosure. She still kept a bit of distance, preferring Nina over the males, but she no longer looked like a ghost of herself. Her coat grew shinier. She began vocalizing, short, low groans, especially around feeding time. Once, during a winter enrichment activity where we buried treats in sand mounds, she pawed through every pile, tossed her head, and made a noise I could only describe as triumphant. Around that time, we started to see something else: curiosity. If we had a school tour passing by, Sahara would watch. Not just glance, watch. Kids would wave or call her name, which was now officially hers, and she'd approach the barrier. She didn't ask for food. She didn't show signs of stress. She just listened. It gave Lisa an idea. We had an education program for middle schoolers, a Wild Ambassadors initiative. Usually we used our llamas or goats for hands-on engagement. But Sahara wasn't meant to be a petting zoo animal. Still, she could be a symbol. A survivor of exploitation turned into an advocate. We worked with the education team to develop a presentation we could give near the camel habitat. We included visuals, desert maps, plant species, and info about camel biology. But the centerpiece was Sahara's story. Not dramatized, just the truth. The illegal circus, the scars, the rescue, the slow adaptation. We didn't sanitize it, but we didn't make it gory. Just honest. The first presentation was in February, a full 7 months after her arrival. It was a small group, just 15 students and 2 teachers from a local charter school. I stood beside Sahara's enclosure while Lauren did the main talk. Sahara stood nearby the entire time. When Lauren talked about her early days, how she was afraid of people, Sahara lowered her head and chewed calmly, as if acknowledging the past but no longer living in it. That day, 2 students came up after and asked if they could write to her. Not me, not Lauren, to Sahara. I still have those letters in a file. After that, the program expanded. Once a month, we'd do a Sahara session. I became the unofficial narrator, and Sahara became the quiet, steady presence behind the story. The kids started calling her the Queen of the Dunes. She didn't seem to mind. At the 6-month mark, our director submitted Sahara's case to a National Animal Welfare Report. It was accepted and featured in a segment on illegal wildlife entertainment. Her story was also picked up by a small Arizona radio station, and then again by a rescue animal blog. Nothing viral, just a slow ripple of truth. We never used her for tricks. Never made her pose for photos or wear accessories. Sahara wasn't a performer. She was a survivor and a teacher. And she started changing us, too. Staff meetings included new discussions about how we present animals to the public. We revised some of our enclosure signage to include rescue details. We added new desert flora around the camel habitat so it looked more like her original ecosystem. One of our caretakers even studied Saharan camel migratory paths to better understand her instincts. I think the biggest shift was in the way we talked about her. She wasn't the rescued camel anymore. She was just Sahara, a full individual with a past, a present, and a role in something bigger. But her journey wasn't finished. And none of us quite anticipated what would happen the following spring, when Sahara finally stepped into the spotlight not just as a symbol of survival, but as a central figure in our conservation outreach. It was spring again, almost exactly 1 year since Sahara had arrived, when something shifted in the way people saw her. By then, she was fully integrated into the herd. Her body was healthy. Her coat had thickened. Her muscles had returned. She was active, responsive, even opinionated. She'd grunt loudly if her breakfast was late, and she'd taken to flipping her rubber feed bowl when she was bored, scattering pellets across the sand with deliberate flair. But what really changed was the public's reaction. The Sahara sessions had grown in popularity. What started as a once-a-month school event became a bi-weekly fixture. Teachers brought their classes. Scout troops asked for private sessions. Some adults even came on their own, drawn in by articles, word of mouth, or the subtle impact of seeing a creature who had survived unimaginable exploitation quietly thriving. One day, we had a visitor, Drive. Anita Feldman, a conservationist and professor from a university on the East Coast. She was in town giving a talk on illegal wildlife trade and decided to visit the zoo unannounced. I didn't know who she was until later. I was just doing the usual presentation, walking through Sahara's story, standing by her enclosure as I spoke to a group of high school students who were quiet, attentive, unusually mature in the way they absorbed each detail. Sahara stood beside us the whole time, as she often did now, facing the group with her neck stretched and her head slightly tilted, the way she did when she was curious. Occasionally, she'd groan softly, almost like she was echoing the cadence of my voice. After the group dispersed, Dr. Feldman introduced herself and asked a question I wasn't expecting. Have you ever thought about letting her story reach wider? At first, I didn't know what she meant. She explained that she taught a course on wildlife ethics and human-animal relationships, and she believed Sahara's journey could be a powerful case study, not just about rescue, but about long-term recovery and the ethical obligations humans have toward animals they've harmed. It sparked a series of conversations between our zoo's education team and a few external organizations. Within a month, Sahara's story was included as a segment in a webinar series for wildlife professionals. By midsummer, it had been adapted into a module for high school curriculum through a nonprofit focused on animal welfare education. We never filmed her, never put her on camera beyond the occasional respectful photo from across the enclosure. Everything was based on narration, images of her habitat, and the story as we knew it, facts, observations, documented behavior. Her face never became a logo. Her name wasn't used to sell merchandise. That was something we all felt strongly about. And yet, she became a symbol anyway. One of the most powerful moments came during a quiet Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't an event day, no crowds, no speakers. Just me, Sahara, and a small group of volunteers doing rounds. I was filling her water bin when I noticed a man and a boy standing a few feet back from the rail. The man was holding a small binder and gestured to ask if they could approach. I nodded. He introduced himself as Carlos. His son, Miguel, was 10. Miguel had learned about Sahara through his school's reading program, one of the pilot classes using the new curriculum module. He'd written a report on her. And when he found out they were taking a trip near our state, he asked if they could come see her in person. Miguel didn't say much at first. Just stood silently, watching her. Sahara didn't move for a while, but then she slowly walked toward us. Not all the way, but close enough that you could see her eyes, that dark, ancient calmness they carry. Miguel stepped forward, and in a small voice, he said, "You're free now." I don't know how many times I've heard children speak to animals, but that one sentence stayed with me. It captured everything we had worked for. Not just her rescue, but her return to agency. Her right to exist without suffering. Her ability to stand, not perform. We'd come so far since that first day when she stepped off the trailer, weak and silent, blinking under the weight of the sun. Now, she had her space, her herd, and her role, not one she was forced into, but one she grew into by choice. I eventually helped write a report that included Sahara's full timeline, from the illegal circus to her daily routines now. It was submitted to an international ethics review board that studies the impact of animal welfare narratives on public education. The report emphasized not just her survival, but the months of behavioral therapy, socialization, trust building, and careful decisions that allowed her to heal. It wasn't about rescue success, it was about the long road that comes after. Behind the scenes, Sahara still had preferences, quirks, and moments of stubbornness. She hated unexpected loud noises, especially metallic clanks. She didn't like when the younger camels jostled near her during feedings. And she still reacted to certain smells with visible agitation, likely a trauma memory we'd never fully understand. But she also had favorites. She liked green grapes. She liked when you hummed near her. And she loved scratching her neck on a particular post in the southeast corner of the yard, so much that the post eventually wore down smooth. And she liked people. Not all of them, and not always. But certain ones, those who approached slowly, spoke softly, stayed a respectful distance, she would watch for long stretches. I like to think she was deciding who we were. Whether we had changed. Whether we were worth trusting again. It's been over 3 years now. Sahara is still here. She's older, of course. Slower. Her gait is a little stiff in winter. But she's calm, grounded. She naps often under the large acacia tree we planted in her enclosure, a tree native to North Africa, meant to remind her of a place she may never have truly seen, but whose rhythms are still in her blood. Every once in a while, someone asks me if animals like Sahara know what they went through, if they remember. I don't pretend to know the mind of a camel. But I know this: Sahara doesn't flinch anymore. She doesn't pace at night. She doesn't brace when people speak. She has her space, her herd, her name, and every time I walk past her enclosure, whether I'm giving a tour or just making the rounds, I nod and say hello. And she lifts her head, blinks slowly, and stares straight through me, not as a ghost of what she was, but as the quiet, steady force she's become. She doesn't tell her story in words. She doesn't need to. She lives it, and if you're willing to listen, she'll show you everything you need to know.